Oh, I think we are there. Okay, that's good, I think. All right, so welcome to the program on this Tuesday, the 7th day of July, 10:03, a little bit late getting started today, and that's simply because I am in the studio today, back in the saddle again, or back in the studio again, I guess I should say. And it's unfortunate that we ever had to, go out and do the show from home. I enjoyed it, though. I got to be honest with you. I enjoyed doing it from home. I enjoyed, and, I'm kind of selfish. The reason I enjoyed it from home was because I enjoyed having my dogs around. Isn't that sad? Well, when you're a dog lover like I am, that's just kind of the way it goes. All right, so I have a Facebook friend who lives in New England, or not New England. He lives in England, and his name is Ed. And he wrote a really good post about forgiveness. And I'm going to read a little bit of what he talked about on his post, but I will be honest with you that I don't agree with everything he said. Given that, I think it's important that we at least hear the message that he has. And it is not a short one, I will tell you that. But it's important that we kind of get an idea about what he's thinking. And especially when you think about the fact that he is coming from the UK. And so he's really commenting more on what's going on in America than he is what's going on in the UK. I don't know exactly what goes on in the UK or what he's facing over there. But his post is quite interesting, and it talks about forgiveness and how we need to look at what's going on and how are we going to forgive. And as you know, that is a passion of mine, forgiveness. It is what I believe that God has put me on this planet to do. I believe that's his will for my life. And I also believe that he's called me. He's called me to help people learn to forgive. So, I'm looking up the thing here. All right, here it is. And I'm not gonna identify this guy because I didn't get a chance to ask his permission. So I'm not going to identify him, but I do want to read a little bit of what he wrote. Now, let me make this perfectly clear again, and I will say this again, and probably again and again and again, and that is that I don't agree with everything he says. I am reading it to you and sharing it with you because it talks about forgiveness. And he's asking, how do we forgive this thing that's going on across the world with the protesters and that kind of stuff? And I want you to know that I don't believe the movement of Black Lives Matter is responsible for what some people are doing in looting and destruction. I have spoken to many people who are a part of that movement, A week and a half or so ago, I had K.O. Samad in here, and he is the gentleman that you see on television a lot with the mask. He is a state legislator, and he has been at the center of many of the protests, and it is not fair. This is my opinion now. It is not fair for us to put a big black mark on the Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter movement, and blame them all for what's going on. Now, you can disagree with me. That's okay. That's just my opinion. I'm not trying to change your mind or give you any input that would change your mind. I do, however, feel that it's necessary to, point fingers at the people who deserve to have fingers pointed at them. And I don't know who they are. There have been some people who have been called leaders of this movement that have been arrested. They have been charged. I don't know the gentleman's name, and quite frankly, if it's okay with you, I don't really care what it is. There was that breakout at a local grocery store a few Saturdays ago, and the gentleman who was photographed both live and still jumping up and down on the top of the Des Moines police car, he has been arrested for much of the damage that was done to that police car, and that is a felony. And so we're going to have to see what happens with that. I'm a little uncomfortable talking about this, I'll be honest with you, because I've seen how some people take, when opinions are shared on Facebook, I've seen how some people just automatically shove you over in the corner and call you a racist. And I had one guy, my last name is spelled M-C-K-O-Y. It's not M-C-C, it's M-C-K-O-Y. And I actually had one gentleman say on a post and spell my name M-C-K-K-K-O-Y. And I actually reached out to that individual. I researched and found his phone number, and I reached out to him and I said, please don't do that. That is one of the worst things you could say about someone, that they are involved in an organization like that. And I will be glad to unfriend you, but that is not my habit. I don't usually unfriend people. There are some people that I have blocked, and usually I block people because of their language. It's not that I'm a snowflake and I can't handle bad words, but some people just can't seem to get a sentence out without dropping the F-bomb or this. And there are also people who do personal attacks on people when they don't agree with them. I don't have any problem with someone who doesn't agree with what I say. In fact, you've heard me say this tons of time. If two people always agree, one of them isn't necessary. I don't want to be surrounded by people who always agree with me. I don't want that. That doesn't make for a good conversation. But to be called just horrible names, because of one's opinion different than theirs, it's just not necessary. You know, one of the gifts that Jesus gave me when he mugged me, and by the way, we're coming up on that anniversary in 13 days. One of the gifts that Jesus gave me when he mugged me is I really don't get offended very easily. It's not that I don't feel offense sometimes, because I do, but I very, very, very rarely tell someone that they've offended me. And the reason I don't do that is because telling somebody that you're offended by something they just said is really very, very manipulative. It is a tool that a lot of talk show hosts use when they're backed into a corner. And I can remember using it on the air. For those of you that remember the show Max World Live that was on 98.3 for 6 years, I had a gentleman on the radio with me by the name of Bradshaw. And the reason I had Bradshaw there was because he was a generation younger than I am. He is as far left as I believe you can get, with the exception that he's not a protester. Now, he may protest on the radio or on social media, but he would never go out and march with people, and he would never, ever be a part of something where there was looting and lives were in danger, etc. But it was uncommon for me to do this on the air, but every once in a while I'd simply say to him, Bradshaw, I'm offended by that. And a talk show host will use that to stop the conversation. I mean, think about this. If someone tells you, I'm really offended by what you just said, most people would turn around and say, oh, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. Pardon me, let's change the subject. And that's why a lot of people say, I'm offended, because they're backed into a corner. By the way, good morning, Gail. Hope you had a great time while you were home. I hope you spent some time with your kids. And you're a great dad, man. Thanks for being there. And Sharon, prayers are with you and your family. I want you to know that. And prayers were said in the Sabbath studies for you at both Jordan Crossing as well as the Watrous Street Church. So, and Scott, good morning to you, my good friend. I hope you're doing well, and thanks for being a part of Max World today. Excuse me. Now, I will tell you this. If I were to say something that was offensive to you, and it wasn't my intention to be offensive, and that's the operative phrase here. It wasn't my intention to be offensive. If you were to say to me, hey, that offended me. Why did you say that? Well, I'm offended. I would say to you, and I'm not kidding when I say this, you may giggle at this, but please understand, I believe this in my heart of hearts. I would ask you, why do you choose to be offended? Next time somebody tells you they're offended by something you said or did, ask them very nicely. In fact, you might even want to start with the comment, can I tell you something you don't want to hear? Well, I guess. Why do you choose to be offended? Hi, Melissa friend. How are you? First timer here. Well, thanks for being a first timer here in Max World, and I appreciate it. You're always welcome to make a comment and let me know what you're thinking. Because I believe in my heart of hearts, it's not a manipulative tool that I use when I say, why do you choose to be offended? Offense is a choice. It's a choice. some people are offended by this. Hey, Wally, how are you? And some people are offended by that. I don't get offended when someone uses the F-bomb or the slang word for feces. I'm not offended when someone takes the Lord's name in vain either. I'm sad for them. And I really am. I'm not kidding you. I'm not saying that to be manipulative or anything. I'm sad when people take the Lord's name in vain, because God hears everything you say. And I was very blessed in this world. Even before Jesus mugged me and I had a relationship with him, I still did not take the Lord's name in vain. I did not, GD or JC. I somewhere inside of me, I knew that was the wrong thing to say. And I probably learned that from my grandmother, because my grandmother was a good Mennonite woman. And the thing I always say about grandma is I don't think she owned a pair of pants. Even out in the garden, and she was a gardener. Even when we played basketball, we had a basketball hoop in the back house, or the back of the house, where my grandma and grandpa lived. Even then, she always wore her Mennonite dress that was always below the knees. And those, I don't know if you guys remember this, but those orthopedic gray shoes that women would wear back then, or maybe men wore them too, I don't know. But that's probably where I learned about being offended and taking the Lord's name in vain. Because I'll tell you what, I remember once I said the word crap. Okay, now this is 1960. And I used the word crap, and my grandmother the old saying, washed my mouth out with soap. Well, what my grandmother would do was she would wash my tongue with a bar of soap. And the soap she used was, are you ready for this? It wasn't Dial. It was lava. Remember that gray bar of soap that you bought because you really got your hands clean? Lava soap. And she would wash my tongue. Anyway, I digress. 21 minutes after 10 o'clock, 10:21. So the next time somebody says they're offended by something you said or did, ask them why they choose to be offended. And you don't have to be mean about it. They're probably going to come back and say, well, I don't choose to be offended. I just find that offensive. Well, I know, and we don't need to get into a big, long conversation about this, but I just want you to know that you choose to be offended. And I'm asking you why you would ever choose to be offended, unless, and this is the operative phrase, you're trying to change the subject and make me feel bad. And when someone says that they're offended, I don't feel bad, because I don't purposely say things that I know are offensive. Okay, I'll give you an example. In the community that I grew up in, Beatrice or Beat Rice, Nebraska, the state of Nebraska's developmental home was there. And this was a large campus. It kind of looked like an army base. It was a large campus where the mentally ill people would live, and they were taken care of. Well, when I was growing up, the word retarded was not an offensive term. That's the term we used for mentally ill. If I were going to use that word today, I would know that it's offensive to some people. And even though I don't mean it to be offensive, I understand that it offends people, so I don't use it. So you can't question someone who says, I'm offended by that, by saying back to them, why do you choose to be offended if you're being a jackrabbit and trying to offend somebody? So I'll get off my soap opera. The reason I started that, if you just joined, I'm going to read something posted on Facebook, and I don't agree with it all. So I want it clearly said. Now you're going to say, well, Mac, why do you read something if you don't agree with it all? Is that all you want me to do on the radio show, is just tell you everything I agree with? That's not much of a show. That's not very good conversation either. I want other people's voice. And the only reason this gentleman is not on the radio with me today is he's in it's like 9 o'clock at night where he lives, or probably even later than that. So anyway, he says forgiveness. Any ideas? Well, it's over and assuming our side, or when it's over and assuming our side wins. I think he means the elections. How do we forgive those who trashed our country? Now, even though he lives in New England, or not New England, in the UK, he's from here, and so he always thinks like an American and takes things that go on over here to heart. How do we forgive those who trashed our country, tried to overthrow our duly elected president in a failed coup attempt, misrepresented the least racial country in the world as being systematically racist, demonized honest, hardworking, patriotic people of faith as being awful, racist from birth, who deserve to be shamed, ridiculed, and attacked, when in fact they rejected all forms of racism outright. How do we forgive those who financed, supported, marched with, looted, rioted, vandalized, destroyed, and occupied? How do we forgive those that attacked and drove out sworn public safety officers and viciously attacked the innocent under the bogus banner of symptomatic racism that they used as a cover for radical left-wing Marxist revolution and insurrection to overthrow their own government? Now, once again, I want to make sure you heard me. I don't agree with everything he says. Okay? I don't agree with everything he says. How will we possibly ever forgive or ever again trust the single most outrageously radical and political partisan propaganda machine in history that masqueraded itself as mainstream news? A media so evil and so dangerous that it formatted insurrection and the outright destruction of our constitutional republic. How do we forgive a fake news media that was so totally and viciously dishonest that nothing they reported could be trusted? I ask you earnestly, how can that ever be forgiven? How can that possibly be allowed to go unpunished? How do we possibly forgive elected officials who allowed their cities to be set ablaze, rampaged, utterly ruined, and destroyed while pulling back police protection from citizens and businesses that were under attack? How do we forgive elected officials who turned their backs on our police, refused to support them, participated in attacking them, and then set about to defund them, even as they themselves called upon these same police that they so hated to come and protect them? Is it even possible to forgive that? How could it ever be deemed correct to allow such political evil to go unpunished? Oh, once again, I want you to understand that I don't agree with everything he's saying. Good morning, Jason. How are you? How do we forgive Republicans who begged for our support and votes with the promise of representing our collective will, only to turn their backs on us in our greatest hour of need? How can we possibly forgive them for their grotesque deceit and a depth of gutlessness, cowardness in the face of evil that shocked the conscience of our collective souls? The question we must all ask ourselves is, can we even justify allowing them to live among us, let alone continue to hold public office? If we do, what does that say about us? If you're just joining me, I'm reading a letter that I received from someone who is an American but lives in the UK. And the headline is, "How do we forgive?" And that's the reason that I wanted to share this with you today, because you know my passion for forgiveness. He wraps this up by saying, most of all, how can we ever forgive the Marxist Democrats who utterly betrayed their own country, our flag and all that it represents, and for which it stands? Evil Democrats who deliberately lied to us on a non-ending massive scale, outright betrayed us and our country and their constitutional foundations upon which it stands. How can we forgive the deliberate and vicious divide our people they did to obtain power for themselves? What they did makes them unworthy of their citizenship, and the worst among them should have their citizenship revoked and then be thrown out of the country with prejudice, without pension or benefits. That would approach justice. And with that level of justice, perhaps someday, with God's help, we might find a way to forgive them for our own sakes, not for theirs. So then, any answers, any wisdom, any idea on how to forgive all of this? Now, I want to read you some of the responses that this post got, and I can't read all of them because, quite frankly, kind of goes back to that thing I was talking about earlier. Some people are just a little loose with their language, and I'm not going to obviously read that. Mark said, "We don't forgive. We run them out." David said, "My answer would be, as a Christian, is to follow in Jesus' footsteps and his word. We are commanded to love one another and forgive our enemies." Another gentleman stepped in and said, we will need Jesus' divine intervention to forgive this. "Indeed," said another poster, "I'm angry. You can tell from my posts, but I keep going back to my Christianity to correct myself." You know, time out for just a second. Isn't that true? Sometimes, and I'll just speak for myself because I won't speak for you, but sometimes I have this argument with myself. It's like the little angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other one. Because I literally have to go, what this guy said, I have to go back to my Christianity and correct myself. And I think a lot of people, how do I say this? I want to be kind about this. I think a lot of people, especially, well, it doesn't matter whether they're a follower or not. I just think a lot of people don't understand. And again, I'll just speak for myself, that being a Christian is easy. Acting like one is another thing. Trying to uphold what Jesus asks us to do in times like this, at least for me, is very difficult. Maybe I'm the only one. Maybe I'm the weak suck here. But sometimes it's literally, you've heard this term and it gets thrown around. This is not throwing it around. Sometimes it's only by the grace of God that something in my brain, the Holy Spirit reaches up and pops me on the back of the head and says, don't be saying or acting like what you're thinking. I actually have a Post-it note on my computer at home that said, the sin is not in thinking it. The sin is acting upon it. Now, I know how Jesus talked in his Sermon on the Mount about if you look at another person with lust, you've committed adultery. And if you think about harming someone, you've committed murder. I'm not saying that's not true. If Jesus says it's true, it's true. But I can't always stop from thinking about some of the things I think about. I'm just broken. Okay? I'm just broken. I'm not a reactionary person. Very few people have heard me yell in the last 10 years. I used to yell all the time, but I just don't anymore. I don't get upset to the point where I've completely tossed the Holy Spirit and Jesus to the curb. That's getting better than it used to be, but I still think some of those thoughts. And I don't like the thoughts I think sometimes. Sometimes I have to say, in the name of Jesus, Satan, get out of my head. You're not welcome here. Those thoughts are nothing but destructive to Mac, to me. And I can't afford to think that way. David says, but I keep going back to my Christianity to correct myself. Man, is that a powerful statement. Pam says, when you pray for them, forgiveness begins. We are to be the example we want to see in them, speaking God's truth in love. Amen. David says, you ask not just a question, but basically what we will become either way. Will we be a nation of traditional moral values, beholding the constitutional law? Or, as in the past, will the Democrats' deceit and the Republicans' weakness be swept under the rug, waiting for the next bastion to pass? I myself see a civil war coming. I take heart in the words of Ann Coulter. If the Democrats want a civil war, bring it on. We all have the guns and the real men. Once again, let me remind you, please, that I don't agree with everything that's being said. I'm just repeating it for you. Oh, then there's this next guy. The next guy, I love the next guy's comment. His name is Mac. J. Michael McCoy. My only post was, you will be forgiven by God as you forgive others, because that's kind of my motto. Just forgive them, says Ron, and let them decide. Then be prepared for the next battle. Clark says, if we don't prosecute and adjudicate all these cases accordingly, then we are confirming and accepting lawlessness. Glenn says we should punish our enemies by giving them jobs, the same ones they previously exported. Yeah, I just said that. Charles says forgiveness is the easy part. Trust or permission to do it again are completely different. Elaine says brevity is the soul of wit. I don't know. Everyone will choose their own answer. But those that smashed the laws we all followed have to be tried. As has been said, we are a nation of laws, not of lawless men. Jeffrey had a really good comment. He said, mercy cannot rob justice. So first forgive them by letting them choose to stay in this country or leave. If they leave, go with God. If they stay, they must satisfy the demands of justice. They must be adjudicated, sentenced, and serve out their time. Give them an opportunity to serve justice and start all over will be the mercy they deserve. And should they ever turn on our country again, it's treason. All right, so it goes on and on and on, and there are other comments. So what do you think about that? Let's just, hey, Inga, how are you? Inga. I love that name. Now, this is me speaking, okay? First of all, I don't know if we'll ever be able to, quote, unquote, go back to where we were. I think the damage that's happening in our country right now, partially from COVID and partially from the lawlessness of the protesters, the lawlessness. I've said this on the radio before, and I'm going to say it again. We as a country have got to get better at treating everyone equally. Before Jesus, there was no equal. Do you understand that? And there really wasn't a call for equal. Equal would come from those being oppressed. They would be the ones that would step up and say, hey, I want to get paid the same thing that person does if I do the same job. I want to be treated just like everybody else is treated. I don't want to be 5/7 of a human being. I don't want to not have the choice of bettering myself with education or a job or whatever it is I decide to do. I believe that we are having an earthquake in our culture right now. You know, the two cultures of the oppressed and the ones in power, or the ones who are doing the oppressing, we've had tremors before over and over and over, and those are the plates in the earth that bump up against each other. Those are the tremors. The earthquake comes when one side jumps upon the other. Literally, the two plates in the earth, one will literally go up and over. And that's when an earthquake happens. And that's what's happening in our culture right now. And I am sad that it had to come to this. I'm not sure. No, wait, let me back up. I'm absolutely positive we don't need the violence. That's not what's getting our attention. And I want that clearly said and stated. You're not helping yourself when you choose to be violent to get your point across. There will be those who will say, well, we can't get your attention any other way. I don't know about that. I honestly don't know about that, to be honest with you. I do know that in my life of 61 years, I have never chosen to be violent. I have struck two people in my life. Tim Ullman in the 8th grade on the pea gravel playground, and a gentleman who was in one of my facilities one time who was absolutely acting like he was incredibly intoxicated, but he was treating some of the women parishioners, that's funny, I'm sorry, customers poorly in language and also with his hands. And I tried to get that gentleman to understand that was unacceptable behavior. And he took a swing at me, and my reaction, right now, it's kind of interesting because right now I feel fear, which is the fear I felt at that moment. I'm not a tough guy. I'm really not. I'm a lover, not a fighter. And I know that's an old, worn-out phrase, but I don't like violence. I have a hard time watching boxing matches. Sometimes I think I'm just a big sissy with a big mouth. I don't know. But I don't resort to violence under any condition. I've turned around and run from people who want to physically hurt me, which unfortunately happened every once in a while in one of the nightclubs or restaurants that I owned. Boy, it's really weird because I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that inside right now. I just don't like that. I don't see any reason for that. Some people think they can't get their point across unless they are massively, physically, and verbally abusive to someone. That's not me. Now, I will tell you where my character defect is in that. Is if we're just going to have a conversation, maybe an argument, maybe a debate, it might even raise to a verbal fight. I'm okay there. I'm all right there. You come after me or my kids or my grandkids. When I was married, certainly my wife, who I loved incredibly, you were going to hear it from me. So I understand getting upset. I personally don't understand the violence and the looting. But it is what it is, and that's what's going on right now. And I hope that's not the new norm. There's a lot of people that don't like our president. And I'm one of them a lot of the time, more often than not. I think he's a bully. I think he's narcissistic. I think he says things about people that are just unbecoming of anyone, let alone the president. But I believe also that those people who can't see the good that he does, they're just as bad as he is when it comes to name calling and bullying. They're just as bad as he is. And that same grandmother that used to play basketball with me and work in the garden and wash my tongue with lava soap when I said bad words, she also taught me that returning, what she used to say was, two wrongs don't make a right. And I've done a decent job of practicing that in my life. It's hard sometimes because we want to say, oh, yeah? Really? You're going to do that to me? You're going to say that to me? You want that? Okay, well, you made the rules. As a kid growing up, I didn't understand the golden rule as Jesus meant it to be. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So be an example of what you want to be. What I understood it to be, hello, General Sand, nice to see you, back in the studio again. I understood it to be, and I know this is messed up, okay? I know it's messed up. But I really thought that it was, as you treat me, I will treat you. And I didn't think that was rebellious or even rude. I know, I'm messed up. It took me a lot of years to figure this out, so just give me a break. I really thought that if that's the way you're going to treat me, that must be the way you want to be treated. Now, I got to tell you, that's one of the most screwed up thinking that anybody can have. Luckily, I figured that out before Jesus mugged me. But after Jesus mugged me, I really figured it out. Many times, I found that my God was me. Some of you out there can probably relate. And if you treated me a certain way, then treating you that way was the way it worked. And it wasn't until Jesus came into my life that I realized that I had the example of how to act finally from God in the form of Jesus. And that's how I try to treat people now. I don't always do it perfectly. Sometimes I just lose myself in a thread on Facebook. I don't usually lose myself on the radio, but you probably could point out instances where you felt I have, and I want to tell you that I apologize for that. I don't mind being passionate. What I don't want to be is rude and offensive. And I apologize to you when I've done that in the past. And I'll apologize because I'm probably going to accidentally do it again in the future. These times that we're in tries all of us to the bone. My mom used to say, I've got one nerve left and you're on it. And that was when Little Mac would turn around and go away. Because when my mother, and I love her deeply, she is still living today at age 90 with my dad. 90 years old. Complete faculties. Excellent, both of them. I don't know what the deal is. I don't have half my faculties, and I'm 30 years younger. But you didn't push my mother over that edge. And I think that's where I learned that character defect was from her. That if you push me so far, I'm going to break. I will tell you now, as a follower and lover of Jesus, that break is usually a broken heart. It isn't, okay, now you're asking for it. But we got to figure this out, folks. We got to figure this out. Jason writes, take the high road through the valley. We all should strive to do that. You're so right, Jason. And by the way, Jason, you're a great example of that. You're a really good guy. I fear what's coming around the corner. I fear, I'll tell you what I'm really afraid of. If this president gets reelected in November, I'm not sure what the other side's going to do. And I'm afraid of that. I'm not looking for a fight. I'm not looking forward to it at all. But I think that most people who oppose him, who have been vocal and verbal, and yes, even violent, I think they will feel there's no hope. And when you feel like there's no hope, some of us run under our covers and hide in the fetal position and cry like babies. That's kind of what I do, to be honest with you. But some people, when there's no hope, when their back is up against the wall, they just say, heck with it. Everything goes. And that's when we as Christians need to be there and available for those brothers and sisters. This is when we're going to need Christians, followers of Jesus, to really, really step up and be that example. We may be, we will be in the minority. And we may be the only ones who do that. I don't know. But I do know that I won't be crawling under the covers in a fetal position and crying like a baby. I already hear the call from Jesus to step up. Be like me. Pray. Forgive. Be silent with your anger. And be hope-filled for your enemies. And maybe we have to change that word, enemies. Maybe we can't look at them any longer as enemies. Maybe we have to look at them as captives. Like Isaiah says, when Jesus comes, he will come to heal the brokenhearted and set the captives free. The brokenhearted is us, those of us that love Jesus. Why are we brokenhearted? Because we weren't created to live in a world like this. And we're brokenhearted because of the pain that other people inflict upon themselves. A house divided, as Jason says. The captives are the ones that are being held by evil. They're captive to sin. And the captives are going to need us to see the light of the world, the example of forgiveness in the worst of situations. It's easy to forgive the small stuff. It takes all we have to forgive the betrayal and the abandonment that we feel. I feel betrayed by the other side. I feel abandoned by the folks that are supposedly on the same side I am, but they don't speak up. They don't step out. They don't do anything about it. Pray. Pray that you are capable of that level of forgiveness, the level that Jesus, only Jesus, can teach us. I'm praying for you. Amen. Amen. I'm J. Michael McCoy. Thanks for listening. I love this job. Couldn't do it without you. Right here on KPOG Grimes, West Des Moines, and webcast1live.com. I love you.